The hospital room was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that seeps into your bones and makes the air feel heavy, like the walls themselves were mourning. Emma lay still on the hospital bed, her body exhausted, her heart shattered into pieces too small to ever put back together. She had arrived hours earlier, full of hope, full of life, but now all of that was gone. Her baby, her beautiful baby, was gone. Tears blurred her vision as the doctor's voice echoed in her mind. "I'm so sorry. We did everything we could, but sorry wasn't enough. Sorry wouldn't bring her child back. Sorry wouldn't erase the emptiness clawing at her soul." She barely remembered the next few hours. Faces blurred in and out of focus. Nurses spoke in hushed voices, patting her hand gently, as if that could soften the blow. Family members came, some crying, some whispering words of comfort that felt hollow, but none of it mattered. Nothing mattered anymore, and then she heard it. The word that made her stomach drop. Morgue. She wasn't sure how she ended up walking through those cold hospital hallways, her feet moving without thought, as if something deep inside her refused to let go. Maybe it was denial, maybe it was desperation, or maybe it was something else, something unexplainable. The morgue was even colder than she imagined. The air smelled sterile, and the dim lighting made everything feel eerie, unnatural. She wasn't supposed to be here. No mother should ever have to walk into a place like this for her own child. Her hands trembled as she pushed open the heavy door. The room was empty, or so she thought, but then she saw him. A doctor stood over one of the stainless steel tables, his back turned to her. His hands moved quickly, too quickly, as if he was in the middle of something he didn't want anyone to see. Her breath caught in her throat. Something wasn't right. And then he turned around. Emma's heart stopped. The look in his eyes wasn't one of sorrow or professionalism. It was something else entirely. Something that sent a chill down her spine. She wasn't supposed to be here. But now that she was, she knew she had just stepped into something far bigger than her own grief. Something dark. Emma stood frozen in the doorway, her breath shallow, her fingers gripping the frame as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. The doctor's eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick, with something unspoken, something that made the hairs on the back of her neck stand up. Her first instinct was to turn and run, to get out of that cold, sterile room and pretend she had never seen anything. But something deep in her gut told her she couldn't. The doctor. His face was familiar. She had seen him earlier, in the delivery room, just before everything went dark. His hands had been the ones that took her baby away. Now those same hands hovered over a small motionless body on the table, her baby. Emma's heart pounded so hard, she thought she might collapse. "What are you doing?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely above a whisper. The doctor blinked, his expression shifting too quickly. Surprise, then something else, something guarded. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice eerily calm. Emma stepped forward despite every instinct screaming at her to stop. "That's my child," she said, her voice stronger now, the grief in her chest fueling her. "I need to see her." The doctor hesitated, his body blocking her view, and that hesitation sent a fresh wave of dread through her. He was hiding something. "Please," she choked out, "just let me see her." For a moment, she thought he might refuse, but then, slowly, he stepped aside. Emma took another step, then another, until she was standing beside the cold metal table, and then she saw her baby girl, tiny, fragile, still, but something was off. Something wasn't right. Emma reached out, her fingers trembling, and brushed them against her baby's tiny hand. Ice cold, too cold, but then she gasped. Had she imagined it? That tiny twitch, that almost imperceptible movement, her breath hitched, and she looked up at the doctor, her eyes wide with something between fear and hope. She moved, she whispered. The doctor didn't react, didn't blink. No, she didn't. Emma's heart pounded in her ears. She knew what she felt. A mother knows. Panic surged through her veins. She's alive, she said, louder. This time. She's still alive. The doctor's face darkened. You need to leave, he said, his voice harder now. Emma shook her head, her pulse racing. Call someone. Get help. She's not. The doctor reached for her arm, not to comfort her, to stop her. And that's when she knew. He wasn't trying to help her baby. He was trying to hide the truth. A wave of nausea hit her as the pieces started falling into place, the way the nurses had avoided her eyes. The rushed explanation, the hurried whispers outside her hospital room. Something had happened, something they didn't want her to know. Emma yanked her arm free, her whole body shaking. What did you do? She demanded. The doctor took a step closer, his face unreadable. You need to leave now. Emma looked down at her baby, at the perfect little fingers, the peaceful face that shouldn't have been cold and still. But she had felt it. She knew what she had felt, and she wasn't leaving without answers. The tension in the room crackled like a live wire. Emma's mind raced. She had to think fast. If she was right, if her baby was still alive, then she was running out of time. She needed to act, and she needed to act now. Emma's heart pounded so hard, she could barely hear anything else. The doctor took another step toward her, his face unreadable, but she could see it now. The nervous flicker in his eyes, the way his hands twitched ever so slightly. He was hiding something. He was lying. And if she didn't do something fast, she might never find out the truth. Her baby was still here. And maybe, just maybe, she was still alive. Emma swallowed hard, trying to keep her voice steady. I'm not leaving, she said, her eyes locked onto his. Not without her. The doctor sighed, shaking his head. You're in shock. I understand. But you need to go back to your room. This isn't... Don't. Emma cut him off, her voice sharper now. She took another step forward, standing her ground. I know what I felt, and I know when someone is lying to me. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The air in the morgue felt thick, suffocating. And then, Emma made her move. Without thinking, she lunged forward, pushing past the doctor and grabbing the small cold bundle from the table. His hand shot out, trying to stop her, but she was faster, stronger, fueled by something far more powerful than fear. A mother's instinct. She pulled the tiny body close, pressing her baby against her chest. And then, she felt it again, the faintest, weakest little movement, a twitch of a tiny hand. Emma gasped, her legs almost giving out beneath her. She's alive, she choked out, tears spilling down her face. Oh my God, she's alive. The doctor's expression darkened. Give her to me, he said quickly, his voice now laced with urgency. Emma clutched her baby tighter, her entire body trembling. No, she whispered. Panic surged through her veins. Something was very, very wrong. If the hospital had pronounced her baby dead when she wasn't, if they had taken her down here instead of trying to save her, why? Why would they do that? Unless... A cold realization crept up her spine. This wasn't a mistake. This was something else. Before the doctor could move, Emma spun around and ran. Her bare feet slapped against the cold tile floor as she bolted down, The hallway, her baby held close to her chest. The walls blurred past her. Doors, signs, the sharp smell of antiseptic, burning her nose. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to get out. Behind her, she heard the doctor shout. Footsteps pounded against the floor, chasing after her. Emma's lungs burned, but she didn't stop. She couldn't. She burst through a set of doors and found herself in a brightly lit hallway. A nurse at the far end turned, startled. "Help me!" Emma screamed. "My baby! She's alive!" They tried to. Before she could finish, the doctor caught up, grabbing her arm. Emma struggled, kicking, thrashing, doing anything she could to break free. But then, another voice cut through the chaos. "What's going on here?" Emma whipped around. Another doctor, older, with a badge clipped to his coat. A head nurse stood beside him, eyes wide with confusion. Emma's chest heaved as she gasped for breath. "They told me she was dead," she sobbed, holding out her baby. "But she's not. She moved. She's breathing. Please, please help her." The older doctor's face twisted in shock as he stepped forward, carefully taking the tiny, fragile body from Emma's arms. He pressed 2 fingers to her baby's chest. Then his expression changed. His eyes widened, and he turned sharply toward the nurse. "Get a crash cart now." The nurse ran. Emma felt her knees buckle, her body nearly collapsing from exhaustion and relief all at once. The older doctor turned to her, his face pale. "She's alive," he confirmed, his voice shaking. "She's weak, but she's alive." Emma let out a sob so deep it felt like it came from her very soul. She covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. The younger doctor, the one who had tried to stop her, stood frozen, his face drained of color. The head nurse looked at him, her expression shifting from confusion to suspicion. "What the hell is going on here?" Emma wiped at her tears, breathing hard. "That's what I want to know," she said, her voice raw. Why would they send her to the morgue when she wasn't gone? Why didn't they try to save her? The nurse's gaze flickered back to the doctor, who now looked trapped, caught, and then security arrived. Everything after that felt like a blur. The hospital erupted into chaos. Emma was taken to another room, while doctors and nurses rushed around her. She barely heard the whispers, the murmurs of disbelief, the questions being thrown at the doctor who had tried to keep her quiet. She didn't care. All she cared about was the moment a nurse came back into the room and placed a tiny, pink, breathing baby into her arms. "She's going to be okay," the nurse whispered. "She's a fighter." Emma let out a shaky laugh, holding her baby close. "She gets it from me," she murmured. And for the first time since she had woken up in that hospital bed, she let herself believe it. She had saved her daughter.